Okay, so now let's go ahead and make a rock. I'm going to start here with a cube. Cubes are my favorite things to start with, especially if I'm going to be sculpting. There's lots of ways of making rocks. We can do it with that displacement. We can actually, if you know, recall before where we made some ground using a subdivision surface and a displacement modifier, we can totally do the same thing in here. And you can actually get some pretty good results. Let me show you. And then do a displace, add a new material. Let's give it rock. Always good to name your displaces because you don't know which one is which without it. Go into the settings for it. And I like to do Stucky's fun for this one. Give it a size. Maybe play with a little bit of the brightness and contrast. Color ramps also a pretty fun way of making adjustments to the overall shape, and then we can just change up the strength. So this is a good way sometimes if you're so inclined to make interesting rock shapes. And this is a technique a lot of people use, but I'm not going to actually use this approach, and I'll show you what I will do. So I'm going to give it, let's leave it like this, maybe at level 4 or something like that. And I'm going to apply all of these. So now I have a rock relatively shaped like this with this level of detail, because this is something I can sculpt on as a base because I have enough to go from. Instead, I want to sculpt these things by hand, and I'm going to paint it by hand because, well, you get more control over it that way. So let's go into the sculpting tab, and let's go ahead and use my first tool, which is going to be G, or a grab brush. And I keep this pretty big. You'll notice the grab brush especially stays pretty large. I'm just sort of exploring shapes right now and trying to create an interesting profile for my rock. I don't want to pull it too far because, let's go to my little guy here and let's go ahead and put this on my quick favorites menu. So if you see this and we pull it way, way too far, as we start to subdivide it, these squares are really, really large. I'm trying to keep everything pretty even. Later in the semester, we'll get into things like retopology and how we can actually readjust the shape of this to better fit what's going on here. But for now, I want you to just stick with the geometry that we've got. So when we're at this point, let's go ahead and start adding our multi-resolution modifier. Let's subdivide it a couple times. Let's start with this 2 level here because I feel like this is something I can start with. Turn off wireframe, and the next brush I want to use is my clay strips. I want to use this because I just want to build things up. Now, by default, this often when you're working with this, you'll see some people like to keep it nice and smooth. When I'm sculpting, I actually don't. So if we go back to object, I'm going to shade flat, and that's because I can see better the edges. It reflects back more straight, and it's all going to get smoothed out anyway, especially as I create more faces. But right now, I'm just trying to create like interesting clumps and stuff like that. This is a really good time to research your environment and decide what kind of rocks you have in your environment and what kind of shapes they're making. You know, if it's a sedimentary or a metamorphic rock, what kind of curvature does it have? How did it get here? How was it formed? Under what kind of conditions? I'm just using like large, again, smaller brush than I was using for Move, still pretty big. And I'm just building up form because I'm going to start by etching it away. Sculpting is fun. Compared to modeling, it's pretty different. Modeling comes from more of a CAD tradition, like computer-aided drafting, whereas sculpting is much closer to a traditional sculpting, where it's the metaphors you're slapping clay. That's what clay strips is for, is like the idea that you're slapping physical material on it, and then we're going to erode it away. So once we have a shape we kind of find interesting, it's time to start chipping away at the rock. Just like the rock itself would be formed, it would start with like bulbous forms kind of pushing everything together, and then those forms would start to get chipped away. So to do that, we're going to go to what's called scrape peaks. Brush starts pretty small, but I want it a little bit larger, so similar size. And we can see what scrape peaks does is it carves away surfaces, and depending on the direction and the angle we go with it, it's going to create some really cool, nice looking results here. So you want to take each of these stages and just hit your whole model. You don't want to go in too deep. You don't want to add too many divisions right away. We just want to hit these upper levels. One of the things that's nice about this is if we get a lot of that detail with the clay strips, going over it in a large sort of setting like this will give us some interesting little patterns on the areas we can't hit. So it starts creating some pitting and little chipping for us automatically. Now you don't want to overdo it, because if you go too far, you'll obliterate the interesting details you have. And again, this is why you can't do this with a mouse, because without it, we just don't, it'll knock everything away. We need that pressure sensitivity. We need that ability to control how strong and how light it is. So it's really important that you don't try to sculpting with a mouse. It's just a pain and it doesn't work very well. So again, just keeping it pretty large, keeping it looking at this, like the scale at this level, and anywhere I feel like I can just push a little harder to create a flat surface that's going to be interesting, I'm going to do that. This is probably when I'm doing rocks. This scrape tool is the one I use the most. Okay, so I've got this. It's got some shapes, and now I want to start picking out, using my draw sharp, any of the cracks I can kind of see in here. So I'm sort of figuring out and drawing really lightly right now areas where I feel like parts of this rock and maybe like smaller rocks might be chipped or pieced into it, sort of making a big and you know, more or less stylized rocky kind of chipped formation. Again, looking into your reference, seeing where do you see lines, where do you not see lines? How is this rock overall formed? And it might make a couple bigger grooves in this that are, you know, maybe this guy right here is going to connect back to there, and that's going to create sort of this pattern, just sort of connecting things up, trying to get a cool look. When I feel like I've exhausted what I can do at this level, I can subdivide again. And now I like to go back at it one more time with the clay strips, but this time I'm going to keep my brush a lot smaller, because now I'm going to build up and I'm going to erode. I'm doing the same kind of thing, but I'm thinking about more these individual surfaces, and I'm thinking about the rocks as they're like smaller pieces. I'm not going to go over the whole rock in here, because then it would just be, you know, a good 45 minutes of watching me play with these shapes. I'm going to just do this section here to show you how I handle the finishing. So you kind of want to work your way around, building up, erasing, scraping down. You can change the size of your brush again, just building and eroding things. And then I come back in. This time maybe I'll get my draw sharp in here. And draw sharp I keep much, much smaller, because you can see if draw sharp is larger, it sort of pushes it really softly. To get this one to work right, you really do want it to be relatively small and pretty strong. So let's up maybe its strength factor. That's a little bit better. So this is where I'm kind of, you know, again, etching in, and I'm going pretty deep with things. So maybe even your rock has some interesting crisscrossing patterns to it or something like that. You know, rocks have lots of different kind of patterns in them. And so you can do this however you want. So we get real Bob Ross with it. Now we come back to that scrape peaks. And again, smaller and more detail. And you know what? I feel like I'm at, what, 150? Let's subdivide this again. I feel like now is where I usually know if I'm subdividing is like if I'm here, I can't really see the individual faces. This is also why I like flat shading for this, because now if I get here, I can see the individual faces and I know I'm too close. So I need to get back to about here. And now it's harder to make out the individual faces. So I'm now at the right level. And this is where I just go really light and I start just chipping at edges and stuff. And to me, this is where it gets really satisfying. So you're just making tiny little surface changes here and there, really randomly. I think this is, if you're a real true, like, at heart, you're a 3D modeler or sculptor, this will be your favorite thing you ever do in the class, is just etching at rocks and making interesting little surfaces. If you ever want to get a different look at this, this is all rendered using what's called a matte cap. So if you see here, there's a bunch of these that we have available to us, and they give us different information. And so I almost always use just the primary one, but there's also a couple different matte caps that give us not necessarily color information we're looking at. We're actually interested in shading information. So this gives us some different shading information than the other one does, and it might show edges a little bit better. But most of the time, I stick with the first one. Sometimes I'll use one of these shinier ones just because you can see it's helping me see some of these little notched edges. That's giving me that little reflection on the surface. So this is something I'm going to go all over, and I might come back in here with something like a draw sharp and just add little little pock marks or little pecks throughout it, depending on the type of stone I do. And when you're done, you're going to have something all carved out. Again, I'm not going to spend the whole time doing this because otherwise I'll spend the whole video. When we're done with that, let's go back, and this is actually our rock. It's just set to levels of 0 when we're in our viewport. But I'm going to hide this. I'm going to bring up one of the ones I made already as a demo. So this is one of the high sculpted rocks that I made. And what I did is I set its viewport levels up to my maximum, wherever I was at. As long as, like I said, it's close to 1,000,000. And then I need to make a low poly version of this rock, because see, this rock right here looks great and it's really cool, but it's 393,000 vertices. That's too high, and I'm never going to be able to use that in a scene. There's no way I can put hundreds of these in a scene, let alone dozens. So what I need to do is use Painter to take all the detail here and put it on a much simpler shape. And I'm going to show you how to do that right now. Now, next week, when we get into characters, we need character texturing. I'll talk a lot more deeply about baking and what that means. We're going to do it really basically right now. So the first step is to duplicate this rock. And it's going to be pretty dense. Now, it's important that this rock is at the center, that its scale's all zeroed, so that when I move this one and I make a couple changes, you'll see what I'm talking about. And I'm going to go to a much, much lower resolution. Something that just gives me the basic size. This is fine. This is okay too, but this might even be too much. But you know what? This might be a good start. So if I set it to like 4, but probably 3, let's give it right here. And then I'll say, not duplicate, I want to apply. So now this is in the mesh, it's baked into the model, and this is the overall surface of the thing. Plenty of geometry, so it's in the thousands. And you know, this actually might be fine, depending on the size. If this is a really big rock in your scene, 1,000 something might be fine, but we can actually go a little lower if we use a couple different modifiers. So let's set it to wireframe mode, and let's add a decimate modifier, and we're gonna set it to collapse and set a ratio of like 0.1 to start with. That's too low. So we can see decimate, what it's trying to do is it's trying to simplify shapes. And then if I duplicate this, I can add another modifier called a planar modifier. And at about 5%, it tries to sort of look for anything flat and turn it into one shape. So that brings me down to 1,000. This brings me down to 800. And then after all of that, I can add a triangulate modifier. And this will turn all of it back into triangles, which is really important if we want to work in Painter. I like to leave the triangulate modifier at 5. It means it'll triangulate anything that has more than 4 sides. So if it has 4 sides, it'll keep it as a quad, and then it's fine. It's just easier to work with that way. So now here is my overall mesh, and it's going to fit this shape. And let's take all of these and apply them. And then I need to UV unwrap them really quick because, of course, we don't have this object. To unwrap this, what I like to do is pop into a view, hit 1, and we're in X-ray mode, which is really important. And let's look at our verts, and let's do a select lasso. And I just want to get like the top half of this, because I just need the top and the bottom half. Let's hit 3, and I'm going to rotate into this view. And we need to turn, let's say, this into our edge. I like to select maybe a couple faces because I want to keep it as straight as possible. So if there's a way of keeping this little edge straighter than otherwise, that's a great move. You know, I'm trying to avoid any really obvious kind of corners or edges. So this is probably pretty good. I'm going to remove these two because it creates like a nice, almost nicer seam. And then I can come up here to select, and we're going to go to select loops, and I'm going to say select boundary loop. So it just selects these edges. And now E, mark seam, A, U, unwrap. I find it's interesting. It always tries to pack these unwraps down into here. And I think we could do a lot better than this layout. So I'm going to select this. I'm going to rotate it, kind of notch these together a little closer like so. And then scale them both up. And we have to make sure, and this is really, really important. So I'm going to say it like 2 or 3 times. Everything has to stay in this box. And they can't be overlapping because this won't work otherwise. We want to keep them. It's cool if they're right up to the edge, that's fine. But we need to make sure there's enough space in between them, and we need to make sure they don't overlap. So once we've got that, we've got our low poly rock unwrapped. And we need to make sure before we export these and use these in Painter that they're both in the same location, and this one is not. So let's set that to 0. And this is our rock sculpt. I'll do demo low because I already made a low. Demo's demo, that's done. Rock demo low, that's great. So now I'm gonna take this rock demo low as it is. I'm gonna export it as an FBX. I made a hotkey for it, which is really easy to do, but if you go to export it FBX, I just made a hotkey by adding the shortcut right here of Control-Alt-E. You can do whatever you want, or you can just always come up to this little button. I just export FBXs so frequently, it's nice for me to have as a hotkey. And let's go to my class folder, week 3, and we're gonna call this rock low, because this is our low poly rock with fewer details. We wanna make sure selected objects is on. We wanna make sure every other setting is pretty much the same, but under geometry, I wanna make sure normal smoothing is set to face. By default, it says normals only. That doesn't always work great in some programs, and I like to make sure tangent space is on. Other than that, these are all fine. And I can go ahead and export that. And now let's select our high poly rock, rock sculpt high. Now, it's gonna automatically apply this shader that's in here. Oh, you know what? Something I forgot to do. I'm gonna have to re-export that. See, aren't you glad I did that already? Let's turn off my high rock. My low poly rock is still, actually is smoothed out, but in case it's not, you wanna make sure you do shade smooth on this, because if it's flat and you shade it flat, it'll try to bake it, but it will always leave these flat edges. So we wanna make sure we smooth it before we export it, and just in case, I'll re-export rock low. Now let's turn off this and get into rock high. Let's take a look at this one. We can shade this one smooth, although it doesn't make much difference because there's so many faces. It's a much bigger model. And let's export this as an FBX, and we're gonna name this rock high. Same settings for everything, although the settings here aren't quite as important. So now we can export this as an FBX. It's gonna take a little longer because it's a heavier model with a lot more points. So give it a second. There we go. And now I'm gonna come into my Substance Painter. Before we open this project up, I want to show you the difference in relative size of these two, because it's a huge difference. If we look at our models in size, Rock Low is 117 kilobytes, whereas Rock High is like 36 megabytes. A lot bigger because there's a lot more detail in there. In fact, I have had some models where I'll do like super high resolution, hyper-realistic human likenesses, and those models can be 16 gigs, was I think the largest one I've ever done, which used a ton of like high-definition scan data. So the high-definition model is not only it takes a long time to load, it's because it's so big, and imagine loading hundreds of these. Your computer couldn't handle it. So let's go up to Substance Painter, let's create a new project, and let's go ahead and select that Rock Low that we're working with. I gotta be on my desktop. Here, week 3, and don't see any FBXs. Did I not put them in the right spot? Thought I did. Oh, I'm looking at videos. This is my folder for videos I upload. It's just called like almost the same thing. Okay, Rock Low. And we can open it up and leave all these other things exactly the same. 1024 is more than enough for this. Say okay. And here is our rock, and it's not very inspiring. Don't forget, you've probably gotten you opened this in a while. It is Alt and left mouse, Alt middle mouse to zoom in and out, or Alt right mouse zoom in out, and Alt middle mouse to pan. In this program, I tend to go right mouse button, middle mouse button, because you don't use the middle mouse as much, and it's more for pan. And you're gonna be using the right mouse more frequently, whereas middle mouse is almost only used for navigation. So I know it's hard skipping back and forth between programs. It drives me nuts too. Try sculpting in ZBrush and then Blender, and then ZBrush and Blender bouncing back and forth. It drives me nuts. But what we want to do is take this rock with like its lower geometry and lower polygons and make it look exactly like the higher definition rock. And we can do this with texture set settings. So scroll down a little bit here, and we can see there is no normal map or ID map. And of course, as you remember from last week when we were bringing in textures from Texture Haven, there's normal maps and roughness maps and all those, and we don't have any of those yet. What we can do though is bake them. So let's go to Bake Mesh Maps, and it's gonna bring up this menu. So in our common parameters, we wanna use 1024, which is the size we're working in. and we want to add a high definition mesh. So this high definition mesh is going to be rock high, and what it's going to do is it's going to say, hey, let's take the details of rock high and let's bake it onto the textures, which is why we have to unwrap the low poly rock or this won't work, because the materials have to go somewhere. Leave the rest of the settings the same. I'm going to turn off ID and I'm going to turn off thickness because I don't need these two, but I'm going to leave on normal, world space normal, ambient occlusion, curvature, and position. Depending on how good your computer is, this is a good time to save it. This is a good time to make sure your laptop's plugged in, whatever, because this can take maybe of a couple minutes, depending on how dense your model is, how heavy your large model is, and how powerful your computer is. So I'm going to go ahead and say bake selected. Mine's pretty good, so it should go through this pretty quickly. So what it's doing is it's calculating all those things. It finished all my bakes, and this is what it gives me. And you might say that's just your high poly rock, but it's not. That's the whole point of this thing. If in fact I go to my little display settings here, and let's turn on wireframe, you can see this is still the wireframe of the object. What it's done is it's created a normal map that makes it look almost identical, especially from a distance, to my high poly sculpt, but it's still like just a couple hundred verts. So now we can start texturing it, and this is the fun part as far as I'm concerned. So you can see these are the normals it baked and all of that. Let's get into layers, and let's add a new base layer. There's a couple different objects, of course, in here. Oh, don't want to do that. If you accidentally rip any of these shelves off, you can just snap them back into place. So I've got different materials in here. I like to start with something like this, like little concrete base here. I don't know the whole name of this one, but I can click it and drag it, and it's going to set it on top of my rock. And you can see it's like, hey, it's pretty rocky already. And I can come down into concrete base and I can change up its hue. So give it a couple different properties, maybe make it a little greenish, change up its brightness, make it a little darker. Maybe change or alter the saturation. I don't want it to be that saturated. Play with the bump, and I can play with things like its overall scale, like how large the scaling texture is. And you see it's got this seam along here, because that's the seam that I unwrapped my object along. The higher the scale, the harder it is to see, but once you notice it, you can't unnotice it. So I'm going to change projection from UV to what's called triplanar. And what's cool about this is it doesn't matter, because it's using actually a blended three-dimensional. You can see it's like three axes are all blending together. So let's create a size that looks pretty good, and it's going to depend on how large my rock is supposed to be. So this is a good start. I can play with some of these settings, and I can change things like how stiff or hard like that little blend is, but let's keep it really soft. So there's lots of different things in here. I can change my seed and randomize it to give me something different. And now what I want to do is add up a couple of extra little curves and details. So let's add a new layer, and I like to start these off as red because it'll show me what I'm working with. And down here in my masks, I have a bunch of different masks that I can use. And you can see if you hover over these, it's going to give you different kinds of patterns on things, which is cool because it gives you, like this is showing you white is where the things will show up. So let's say I take this cavity rust and I drag it onto this layer. What's automatically going to start saying, let's find the crevices of this object using all the maps that I baked. And if I come down to this mask editor here, I can change some of the settings in terms of its overall smoothness. I can change how much of it is in here. I can change the strength of the contrast. And this lets me really choose how I want to blend this in, how much of that noise it's going to have in there. These are really fun to play with just as settings, because you get a sense of you can get a really good sense of what they all do just by sliding them around. When I have something I like, all I have to do is set this color to like a deeper, darker, kind of brownish color. I want to make sure that all I want for this is like my color. I don't want any height or roughness or metalness or normal. I just want to put color in here because I'm just mixing color into the surface. So let's pick, something nice and dark and desaturated. And I could start with something really exaggerated like here, but this is too much, like it's too much detail and it's sort of blowing everything else away. So I can come to my layers and just turn it down until it gets just about where I want. So now I've got like these cool little like crevices for my rocks. Let's do the opposite. Let's pick out some of the top layers. So I'm gonna add another layer, same deal. Let's add a lot of a lot of high red. And let's look at edge rust. These are all really fun. Cavities. This little occlusion might be interesting because it might help me pick out some of the interesting edges. And so I'm going to take this occlusion that I got here. Let's see. I don't know if this one's going to do what I want. This one's too close to the other one. I'm going to remove this mask. And let's find something more on the surface. Ooh, like scratches are cool. You can get like little pebbling. Oh, let's do gun edges. That should be fun. So this is going to give me, you see, like little etched out, lined out edges. And let's go ahead and go to our mask editor. And let's change up things like set our blur pretty low and contrast. Pull down that texture a little bit. It's a little strong. And now I can set this and see, give it like a lighter color. So let's give it a nice light, maybe brighter hue. I think I'm going to pull this. Concrete feels a little too bright to me. So I'm going to take that luminosity down a little bit. So depending on how exaggerated or stylized this is, you might want something a little different. Again, just like before, I don't want any height or other details. I just want my normal kind of details on here. I could do a roughness difference and just make this really, really rough, because that's also going to shine a little different. And then I could take my normal and I just pull it back until it's like it's hinting. And so you can see, like, why would I do all these layers? Well, look at this versus this. This isn't as interesting as this. This is getting a lot more detail, a lot more interest. I'm going to add one more thing, just one more thing. I'm going to add little speckles to it. So same deal. Let's do red, and I want to get something that's going to feel like it's got lots of little sands. Dust is pretty good. Rust could work actually pretty well for this. Anything that's got looks like spots all over it. So dirt spots, I think, is my winner here. So let's drag dirt spots over it. And you can see it's going to give me just little speckles all over it. So under my mask editor, we can play up with my balance. So it just shows up in a couple spots. And I can edit my clouds as well. Give just a little bit of this, maybe add a little less blur, a little bit more balance. And then let's change the color of this to, you know, almost like there's a little, give it a nice, like, kind of opalescent color like this. Pull it down a little bit so it's not quite so bright. And now I can say height off, metal normal off, but I'm going to take that roughness really low. And so now what I'm going to have, it's a little hard to see, but if I control and, I think it's control, what is it? Oh, there it is. It's a shift right mouse. I can see that it's actually going to change how it reflects on the surface, because it's going to give those little flecks a little lighter kind of color on the surface. So once I've done all of this, and of course there's so much more we can do, and if I want, I can go in and paint things by hand, but most of the time I use a lot of generators like this. And now, to get it all back out, all I have to do is export those textures using my sort of default settings. Find the spot I want to put it, which is going to be back in my folder for the class. Week 3, select that folder. Pings are fine. I like targets because I'm old. And all the other names, you know, we can change it here. But when we do that, let's export. It's going to export all my materials. And then it's just a matter of, since I'm using the exact same mesh and model that I had already, let's hide the high. Let's bring up my low. Let's go into shading. Make sure I'm seeing my rock here. Go make sure I was doing some testing earlier, so I was in Eevee, not Cycles. Set up my new material. Go to my desktop. $247, week 3, and now I have all of my materials to start plugging in. Color. This is, oh, that's my roughness, isn't it? Oh, this one says height. I don't actually need height for this. I can put in height. There's ways of blending it. In fact, if you want to do that, I'll show you how you can blend the two. We don't need a metalness though. So this is roughness, and that's going to go into roughness. And don't forget, everything else is non-color, with the exception of base color. Everything else is non-color because it's a utility thing. So we can put color into base color. And we got our height and our normal, which is great. I don't need anything metalness because nothing on this object is metal because it's not metal. Otherwise, that would be a different kind of color. And let's go ahead, and there is a height. Oh, Shift A. We're looking for a bump. And we're looking for a normal map. I can take this, run this color into this normal map, and run this normal into here. Make sure I have this set correctly. Oh, it was height. I put the wrong one in there. No wonder. Always got to get the right maps in. And so when I'm done, you got yourself a rock. Pretty neat. So take a look at this yourself. And what's nice about this rock is it's here, but it's also super lightweight. It's, as it is right now, it's 204 vertices, meaning we can duplicate, rotate, and scale these. And just like with our plants, you know, you can stick a lot of these together and rotate them and consider them in different directions. And most of the time, nobody knows. I'd recommend making, 2 or 3 different rocks of different sizes, and then you can really mix these up together. And it's going to create some really nice final results for you. Always worth a check. So take the sun and look at that. Some nice looking rocks. So that's it. Rocks, make a couple of them. It's really fun. Just go nuts with the sculpting. I like doing it. And I can't wait to see what you come up with. I'll see you in the next one.